Startups are rarely built in straight lines, especially in Web3. The technology is evolving, the rules are unclear, the stakes high. And for the Freely team, navigating the frontier meant more than just writing smart contracts or pushing UI updates. It meant facing uncertainty, burnout, and 100 invisible hurdles that most people never see. In this episode, we go behind the scenes to hear what it's really like to build a Web3 product from the inside. The late nights, working at the cutting edge of technology, the pressure of shipping something that actually works on chain with real users and no room for error. This is the Dev Diaries, raw, unfiltered, and real. Let's hear from Jose and Joseph about some of the challenges that the team faced.
For me, the hardest challenge was going to the Philippines and doing the first kind of customer feedback of that product we did in the hackathon. And you put it out there and then realize it might not fit the demographic exactly as you thought until it's actually being in front of them and being used. So having to take that feedback into consideration and then iterate while keeping like your vision intact is a pretty hard thing to stay focused on.
Was that kind of like a continuous process throughout the building? Was there a constant evolving product which kind of fitted into the ideals of what your customers wanted?
Yeah, I think everything changed a lot when we got that verbal commitment from our first customers. So until you get that commitment of a customer, it's a lot of just ideas flowing through your head. Once you like hear what the person needs to use it for, that's when you really start building for that use case. Doing it all over again, it's just find the first customer before anything.
When going from 0 to 1, it's important to get a product out as soon as possible to validate the concept. But the requirement to move fast and break things always comes at a cost. So is there any feature or idea that you really wanted to build, or anything that if you had unlimited time and resources you would have liked to have shipped?
Yeah, well, definitely cards. I don't know if credit cards, debit cards. Well, credit is a whole different product, but in general, just cards, like being able to spend your crypto in this case as easily as any fiat money, that would be just simply amazing, rather than having to worry about all of the anchors and off-ramping, on-ramping, and all of that hustle just to use the money that's already there.
So could kind of like prepaid debit cards fill that gap maybe?
Yeah, definitely. The thing is that there's a lot of service providers for this, but integration is not like very straightforward, and also the monthly fees as like product wise for us to be able to implement these features, then it's like the costs are very high. So if we had unlimited resources and unlimited time, that's definitely the thing that I would be adding to Freely.
Is there anything else that you would have liked to have validated which you didn't do, or you didn't do as thoroughly as you would have liked to, that you can kind of see in hindsight?
Probably since it all started with something that was consumer facing, so more for like remittances and just to enable people to pay their products with the money they receive from abroad. Probably just to test that specific case with 1 or 2 people before just deciding to pivot into something more like business facing. That would be something that could have been like very, very interesting.
Startup life isn't always glamorous. We see the success stories at the conferences and events, but you don't see the grind and determination it takes to get there.
I think definitely just that process of iteration over iteration is a really tiring one, because you go on like this huge high of like such a breakthrough and make a huge sprint out of it. And then it's like when you're like doing it out of an idea rather than out of someone telling you exactly to do it, then it's just like a process that repeats itself and repeats itself until you really do get that person. And yeah, I can speak for both of us when I say it was a very tiring process.
So did it feel like you were constantly taking kind of 2 steps forward and 1 step back?
Definitely.
The team persisted and worked together to build Freely into a viable product ready for the Stellar mainnet. You've obviously used lots of tools and services that you've been building this on. What were the tools and services that you relied on the most, or you'd recommend to other teams that are building Web3?
Well, I think the most important services or tools in general are the indexing tools, because you're working with information on the blockchain that's always going to be available, but as time goes through, also the information, the amount of information available gets also bigger. So this is something that's constantly growing. And since the information it's supposed to be immutable, then as long as you fetch it once and store it, then you can use that information reliably. Like, you know, it's not going to change from the one that's on the ledger. So indexing services are definitely something that's very, very important to consider when building Web3 products. We actually partnered up with another community fund project called Sorban Hooks, which is just a very, very simple indexer that allows us to subscribe to some event changes from specific contracts, in this case, our wallets. And we receive as webhooks the information from these events. And that's how we're keeping track of how the information on the Freely wallets is changing.
So to explain that to me in like layman terms, did you have like an API key or something, or did you just go from the front end kind of React hooks, or was there like a back end API that was kind of communicating with this indexing, third-party indexing service?
No, it's more like a subscription where we specify through an API key which contracts we want to be listening to changes. And then whenever there's a change, in this case, like a transaction on the blockchain, they listen to these changes and they notify us through a webhook that we specify. And that's how we can keep track of everything that's going on with our wallets.
And I know there were some tools that you built yourself as well. Can you talk a little bit about that and how the Web3 community kind of builds open source together and kind of shares the ever-evolving tool set?
Sure. One of the main tools that I've been working with is the passkey kit. Since our wallets rely heavily on the passkey technology, I've also like spent a lot of hours there working on the core project. And there's actually a very, very recent update that I've been making to the passkey kit, which is to allow for custom logging. So we integrated logging to our platform and just regular application logs, like whenever the user interacts with the platform, we have a record of all of these logs. But there's some very, very specific type of logs that we want to keep a close eye on, which is all of the interaction with blockchain. So passkey kit uses LaunchTube to submit all of the transactions, but then sometimes these like server events may fail and we don't know why. So that's why we had to add some extra like layer of observability. And it didn't make sense to add it directly on Freely, but it made much more sense to add it directly on the passkey kit, which is the technology that is actually sending the events to the blockchain. So that's where we added the logs.
Were there any other teams in the kind of Stellar community and the wider Web3 community that you connected with and that you kind of supported each other?
Yeah, in Web3, everybody is super supportive. In particular, we went through the Stellar Community Fund batch, and we looked at people in our cohort and previous cohorts, and we were able to lean on many, many teams in terms of auditing, help with our setups, as well as even like different types of grants that were available for us. So making sure you're reaching out to different teams in Stellar was like a huge strength like under us and pushing us forward, as well as in Web3, reaching out and saying you're with the Stellar blockchain really helped them put it on a priority list. So when we mentioned cards earlier in this call, a lot of people we were speaking with were saying, hey, if you're from the Stellar community, if there's interest, we're going to prioritize making that and compatibility to work with the Stellar blockchain. So it's an ecosystem where conversations amongst teams is really important, and it gets the ball rolling really quickly.
What are the advantages of Stellar for building auditable, transparent financial applications?
Well, in terms of technology, to be honest here, Stellar has been the only blockchain that I've worked with before. And the onboarding process was not that hard. Like after a couple of hackathons, you basically you can go all over the tech and understand what's going on. But then once you're building out a product that's going to be actually working on mainnet or on production environments, there are other things that matter, like transaction fees, for instance. You want to make sure that you're not like charging all of these enormous fees to the users of your application. Uh, Using LaunchTube for me was like a game changer because we are able to send like $0.50 and the user receives $0.50. It's a weird scenario, but in other technologies that I've been also testing with, most of the times fees are a little bit unknown or excessive, or it depends on the transaction amount. So that's pretty interesting. And also the fact that the transaction settles in less than 5 seconds, that's also a game changer because once it's done, it's done. So the money moves from one place to another, and once it's confirmed, you know that the money's there. So that's a huge thing.
And can you explain for anyone that might not know what LaunchTube is?
Yeah, it's a service that has been built by the core team from Stellar, and it's like a sponsoring service. So instead of submitting your transaction directly to an RPC server, you submit it through LaunchTube to the RPC server that you want to, and they are the ones that are going to be covering the fees. In technical terms, you see whenever you submit directly that transaction, you pay for the fee. But then if you do it through LaunchTube, the transaction converts into a transaction fee bump type of transaction, and that's exactly how you see it on the ledger.
AI has revolutionized how we build software products. Large language models like ChatGPT can be used to write code, tests, and debug our problems as developers, but it's not always perfect. So next question moves on to mainly the development, so it's for you, Jose. And how did you find the use of AI tools when you were building freely? Did you find they were able to kind of work at the cutting edge of the technology? And particularly on technologies that they weren't necessarily trained on?
Yeah, I think it's all about the context. So if you're able to design like a very, very complete prompt for your AI coding tool, and also if you give the tool access to the specific documentation and probably just some examples, it's easier to build a product. It's like as if you're pair programming with someone and you both have access to the docs, and then you can suggest ideas, test things out, debug. So yeah, like definitely AI tools have completely changed the development scene all over the place.
And what specific tools did you use, or do you use currently? I know it's ever changing.
I've been testing a lot of them. So when we started freely, I like even before that, at the Meridian hackathon last year, I was already using Cursor, and that was game changer. It allowed me to deliver products 10 or 20 times faster. And then when we started freely, I kept using Cursor, and then as the tech advanced even further, I started trying out Cloud Code, which is very interesting because the technology, you can run the AI technology directly from the terminal. So I've been testing out some like workflows where I run Cursor working on one thing, and then I have Cloud Code on the terminal working on another thing. It's very fun, but you have to be like very careful and very well structured and organized and give the context. But it's very, very cool to work that way.
Do you find that Cursor is more well suited to some tasks, and then Claude Code is suited to like other tasks?
Yeah, I have found like some preferences for specific models. Let's say Gemini is very academic, so it's very helpful to plan the whole like the PRD document for a specific feature on Gemini, and then let's say use Claude for the backend or for anything related to the blockchain, and then Cursor using OpenAI for debugging or some front end components. So but I think that's more like a personal way of how I've been using these tools. Everyone has their own ways of using them.
Obviously, like AI's just completely changed how everyone develops software now. It's made such a massive difference in the last couple of years. Do you think that building in Web3 is changing as well, how we build as software developers?
Well, definitely. I think it depends mainly on the very, very specific use cases. I haven't tried the decentralized storage of documents, but I know that there's a lot of new interest in managing real world assets. I've seen that a lot on Stellar. And then like definitely payments across different currencies or countries. That's like the best use case for blockchain. But you never know where the tech is going to take us like in the next 5 years. Sorban was just released, as you said, 1 year ago, and it has been changing a lot since then. So I don't know where the things are going to be in another 3 or 4 years.
There's no safety net in startups, and in Web3 sometimes there's not even a floor. But this team kept showing up, shipping through the doubt, learning not just how to build products, but how to trust, communicate, and persist. What's the most important lesson you've learned so far on this journey?
Ooh, a lot. In general, just like working on a new project, a new startup is getting user feedback, then iterate as quick as possible, but then also have like a North Star where you can just guide and make. It's going to help you make most of your decisions, but you got to be honest with reality. Like, where's the general ecosystem going to? What's the macroeconomic context? There's like you got to be very honest on what you're building and what's happening around you, and just adapting the journey around all of that. It's a whole mindset.
And what about for you, Joseph?
With in general, I think you just have to be so comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like there's just so many moments where you question everything, like even sometimes questioning the ecosystem and stuff like that, right? And you just have to have the confidence. And the way you do that is by one, finding like an amazing co-founder. Like in Jose, there was someone who was just like so solid beside me whenever I had those moments. And also like the community, like Stellar was always there to lean on whenever we needed them, and that was super important for us. But yeah, be comfortable with not being comfortable, because it's a pretty wild ride.
It's great advice for any startup. 3D wasn't built overnight. It was carved out of hard work, broken builds, and honest conversations. And that's what it takes to take a product to market. In the next and final episode, we'll join a team as they hopefully launch on the Stellar mainnet.